I got this sweater from the thrift store for $3 and I'm just going to show you how I transformed it into a dress. Now the first thing I did was I opened the seams of the sweater, and I did this just to see how much fabric I had to work with. And normally you could just use a seam ripper, but in this case I used a pair of scissors because it really didn't allow me to have too much extra fabric outside of the seam. So I decided just to go ahead and drape this entire project. And so I usually use quilter's pins to do that just because they have the little ball on the ends and it just makes it a little bit easier if I drop one on the floor or one gets lost to kind of spot it. But you can also use the smaller pins. I wanted this to be a turtleneck of some sort, so I just started with a strip of fabric around the neck, just so I can kind of get the idea of how I wanted the design to flow. The key with draping is just making sure you're smoothing out your fabric as you're going through and pinning. And so you can't really tell from this video, but there is a side seam on this mannequin, and that just kind of helps to see exactly where the side seam is in your garment. Draping can be pretty time consuming, especially in my case where I didn't know exactly what I wanted to make. But as I was just laying the fabric on the mannequin, on the dress form, I just kind of figured out exactly where I wanted it to be just as I went along. Once you're done pinning where the side seams meet, you're just going to cut off the excess fabric. And it doesn't have to be perfect because once you take it off your dress form, then you're going to clean up the edges. Since there wasn't anything unique about the sleeve, I just used the actual sleeve pattern. Once you're done pinning, you should kind of see your garment start to take shape, and so this is what I ended up with. Now I'm just going to transfer the pieces over to be sewn, and to do that I'm going to use this water soluble marker, and what it does is it just lets you draw on your fabric, and then it's also erasable. This is just going to show me where to cut where I have fabric that's overlapped. Now when I go to sew this, you want to use a zigzag stitch that's going to prevent your fabric from puckering. In this case, since I'm using stretch fabric, I'm also going to be using some stretch needles. I also use all-purpose thread. The marker transfer method worked for everything except the bust, and that's just because for that part you want it to be 3D, and so darts are going to create kind of a 3D effect on your fabric. And so what I mean by that is it's going to give you more of an angle, and so for that, this is probably not the best example, but I did create darts in the bust. Now this is just a scrap piece of fabric. I did actually do the darts off camera just because my head would have been in the way filming, and plus you want this part to be pretty precise. After you make your cuts, you're just gonna flip it around the other way, inside out, and then you're just gonna sew it down. This is the interfacing I used for the cutouts. They do have double-sided fusible, but in this case I couldn't find it at my particular fabric store, so I just used the sew-on kind, which had one side that was fusible. What the interfacing is going to do is just going to stabilize the fabric, otherwise it'll be all stretched out on the cutout once you go to sew it.